Welcome to the Local PK podcast, where we believe everyone has the option with their everyday decisions to make the world a better place. And so we are here to help share those stories and the opportunities you have to make Lubbock and West Texas the place you want to live. And so I'm your host, Taylor McAlpine with Local PK, and today we have Steve Newsom. Steve Newsom, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, appreciate you having me. Just a local farmer that evolved into the wine business, GM and managing member at Caprock. What used to be Caprock Wineries, now English Newsom Cellars.
Oh,
and
very cool.
We're really loving and enjoying what we're doing, and really happy to be here today. Appreciate you having us.
Oh, we're happy to. You had me out to the winery a couple weeks ago, and I had a great time getting to see the facility, hear your story. Yep. And that's really what prompted this conversation. Caprock has a history of itself, and so it's one of the first facilities that was in West Texas that was really vision casting for the industry, and we'll get to some of that here in a little bit. But I'd like to talk about how you got involved. A little bit of the history of Caprock, and then how you got involved and where it's going. So if you don't mind, could you kind of tell us the story of Caprock as a destination and a wine producing entity?
Yeah, absolutely. So ahead of its time. I mean, even to this day, just having the pleasure to work in such a fantastic facility, it just blows my mind that they built this facility when there was virtually no wine industry, not only here in the Lubbock area, but in the state.
Really?
And it was, it was very much cliche to say, the old line from the movie, if we build it, they'll come. But a guy named Dr. Crisp and a friend of his last name's Crosno, was a farmer here. They had the vision. They were kind of winos before it was cool in Texas, that if they built this state-of-the-art facility, the local cotton growers not only would plant grapes, but the local community would support their vision. Incredible facility. I can't imagine having the type of vision they had at that time. This was before, before there was a wine industry. This was before it was chic, and before most Texans even would consider drinking wine.
Really?
So this, and not only was their vision incredible, the facility they built is just incredible. I mean, there's very little that's changed in winemaking over the centuries, but a few of the things that have changed has been our ability to store, to protect the wines, our ability to produce different yeasts, and those things they absolutely capitalized on. And I could go into detail all day on the things they did that just really made it a great facility to make wine. And even with the changes, as you can probably imagine anymore, you walk into a winemaking facility and say you're going to set your bottling line. Well, everything's on a touch screen in this day and age, and that's the only real changes has been the simplicity of some technology. We've got some things out there we have to hand set still, but that's outside of that, it's really a high-tech facility.
Very cool. Let's create some context for the audience that's listening right now. When was the place built?
1987 is when they broke ground. Actually, I think they broke ground in 86, finished the facility in 87, and some of this I haven't looked up the actual dates court-wise, et cetera, but within a year they were in Chapter 11.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
And, yeah, so the facility ended up being taken over by, at the time, was Plains National Bank, Plains Capital Bank. Their winemaker, very well-known winemaker here in Lubbock, Kim McPherson. And Kim had really built it over the time he was there. He was there 10 or so years. Really built it into some respectable wines, was able to capitalize on the individuals that were planting grapes at that time, and had really put it on the map. And when Plains Capital, for whatever reason, been told several different things. One of the things we've been told is that the feds put a little pressure on them about a bank owning a winery. Don't know the exact details of that. But when they sold it, Kim ended up at that point, shortly after, leaving and starting McPherson Cellars, probably around 06.
Okay.
And the winery changed hands several times between that and when I came into it.
Okay.
So we had we had some challenges ahead of us, and one of the biggest challenges that we had ahead of us was convincing Lubbock that we're not only here to stay, but here to produce the absolute best possible wines we could produce.
All right. So this place has a legacy. If you're talking about Kim McPherson, that's kind of the beginning of Lubbock wine. Does the state have much of a history before this region?
Well, the state itself, was devastated by Prohibition.
Okay.
As far as the wine industry, Texas actually had grapes and wine before California. But the recovery post-Prohibition has just been it's been at a snail's pace for Texas until about 2001.
Okay.
If you won't get into the politics of it, I can give you the big picture overview, and it's pretty interesting.
I think we're going to get to that here in a little bit. Let's kind of focus on the history element here. And man, there's so many places we can go. We were talking about the region. This is a special wine growing region, and so with wine growing, we also have the wine producing in the area. What is the name of the region, and what makes it so special for West Texas, or wine in general?
Yeah, so we're in the High Plains AVA. It's been an official AVA since 1993, and it's not so easy to get an AVA. Now, if you're in, for instance, California, that stands for American Viticulture Area.
Okay.
So once you have to, it's a lot of work, and there was people that really put a lot of work into it, because if you think about it, we became an AVA long before there were thousands of acres up here. And so you had some pioneers and vanguards, just to drop a few names, like Bobby Cox, like Kim McPherson, like Neil Newsom, who's no relation but's a historic wine grower here, that really got in and fought for the region. And it was one of the steps before we had any real political support. These guys were fighting to put us on the map, and the first way you get on the map is to become an AVA.
Okay.
And become recognized for that. And Texas has got several. You've got the Hill Country, you've got Bell Mountain, and several others. But by and large, the majority of the grapes are grown right here on the High Plains in this AVA. And nearly all of them within 30 to 45 miles of Lubbock.
Oh, man. So just like Lubbock is known as the Cotton Patch of America, would it be similar for wine growing almost?
Well, for Texas, absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, if I'm going to say, I haven't seen the exact statistics the last couple of years, but the majority, 80+% of the wines produced in Texas are produced with grapes that grow right here in the Lubbock area.
That's fascinating. And for me, I didn't know much of this before our conversation, and so this was kind of news to me.
Yeah.
So what does that imply for us? What does that make, what foundation is that laying for us now? What did they have to overcome when they were starting the AVA, and where are we headed?
Well, the biggest challenge really was even beyond establishing the AVA. It was just it used to just be establishing a winery.
Oh.
So a lot of people don't realize that in theory, and maybe even technically, Texas is still a prohibition state. So if you've lived in a dry town, dry county in your life, Lubbock's a perfect example. Unless you vote it wet, it's dry.
Okay.
And so we never did a formal repealing of every town or county post-Prohibition. The state kind of left it up to the counties and towns to make their own decisions. So what that resulted in is a lot of the laws related to alcohol production in Texas were influenced by people that weren't necessarily producers.
Okay.
Oftentimes distributors, etc., influenced the writings of the law. So when Caprock was built originally, it was a perfect example. It was built outside of the city of Lubbock, because had they built it within the city at that time, before Lubbock was wet, they couldn't have sold their own product within their walls. They would have been, you could have had a free tasting, but they would have been forced to sell all of the product they produced to a distributor had they been in the city limits of Lubbock.
Okay.
Anybody that's around here knows that's the same reason the Strip was out where it was, because the county was wet, but the city wasn't. That worked against Caprock to a degree, being outside of the city. It's still a battle we fight to a degree, getting people to come out, but it was a challenge that was presented at the time. There's been some really good laws passed supporting the industry since then, but at the time it was not only a huge financial undertaking that Crisp and Crosno took on, it was a huge political undertaking, and the long-term effects. You'll hear me say, even with what I'm doing with Caprock, often you plant a tree you're never going to sit in the shade of. I think Dr. Crisp and Mr. Crosno both knew that the long-term benefits would probably be somebody else, but we're extremely appreciative of their pioneering spirit.
And when we were talking, it sounds the same for you, of the groundwork y'all are putting in and establishing this brand, getting your distribution, producing and getting award-winning wines. You're not necessarily going to benefit from it. You're setting up a family legacy to be continued. Why play that such of a long game? I mean, obviously, part of it's the industry that takes that long. But that's a passion that goes beyond the immediate financial return. And so what motivates you there?
Well, I do think passion is huge. I really do. And I mean, there are some economics that definitely come into play when I think about this. One of the things that originally led me to plant grapes, which grape growing is how I ended up in this situation. I'm a career farmer. I still farm cotton, peanuts, corn, name all the normal Lubbock area crops. But both of my kids showed strong interest in farming, and we had to look realistically at what the legacy could be long term. And some of the things that I feel like work against us in farming is, for instance, with cotton, you're dependent upon a global market. And I could see early on, and a lot of the influencers that I was talking to when I was considering planting grapes really emphasize the fact of, look, you've got a crop in this situation that you can not only get a value-added product with, but a crop that is going to be directly affected, and we can work and influence the market within this state. And that's extremely appealing to me, because I can't tell you exactly how the Chinese or whoever ends up with the cotton is thinking day to day, but I definitely know the pulse of Texas. And do I have a strong influence on that? Maybe as a collective, and maybe doing a good job we could, but we have no influence over, as small Texas growers, over what the Chinese are doing. So that was extremely appealing to me. It's a crop that we're probably another full generation still being able to have everything consumed within the state, even with reasonable growth. We've got a fantastic consumer to deal with. We know our consumer. We know the Texans. That was appealing to me.
That's fascinating. I love it. With the mission of Local Decay, a lot of what we're wanting to do for our community is, one, consumer education, help people know about their options when shopping locally, the importance of shopping locally because of the impact it has directly within our own markets. The fact that when it's locally owned and independent, businesses can adjust to market demands. It can meet consumer needs. It can change, and even help push a market to go in a certain direction. And it sounds like being a producer in the industry, you can have influence. And so you can plant a certain varietal that'll help lead for an industry change within the next 5 to 7 years, I'm imagining.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so with chains and things like that, Chick-fil-A can't turn into a donut shop. While consumer demand may be asking for it, they can't make that pivot because they don't have that centralized or localized decision making. And so that's something we're looking for. And then from there, a certain level of resiliency. And so because of the way you control your product and you plan out your farming and growing periods, you have the control there. And so those are things we want to do to encourage our community to support the local makers, producers, growers, dreamers, and creatives, but then also encourage them to take that next step to become them. And so the fact you've taken this chance of risk to not only benefit you but future generations is really why we're wanting to tell your story, because you're helping represent a whole new industry that's going to benefit our community. And so going ahead and cutting to the end, what we're trying to do is get Lubbock to support you and the industry, because one, you've got a great product. Why not put something out here that could actually become what you and I have talked about, the new staple? It's not the California grape, the Texas grape is what the market wants nationally as we continue moving down this chain of events. And so if we can help expedite that, well, let's do it. It's how I see it. And so bringing everything back, well, let's talk about the product. We're doing it at tasting right here now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and a couple things that I want to just wave the flag for Lubbock. A lot of the things that make the High Plains AVA such a fantastic place to grow grapes are a lot of the things we find as a challenge to live in Lubbock. Wind, for instance. We have the benefits with grapes of really low relative humidities. The sand. We can really adapt with our soil types the majority of the vinifera grapes that are grown in the world. We really have wines growing here within the region from all over the world, and they adapt extremely well. The elevation and the wind both kind of work together for us. So, for instance, Lubbock's at 3,200. The majority of my vineyards west of town are as high as 3,600. What that does for us, one, it's relatively low disease.
Okay.
So, very low chemical use on these grapes here in the High Plains. We don't have to use the amount of products that are used in other regions of the world. We don't have morning fogs that on a regular basis that promote powdery mildew, for instance. So if you were looking for a region, and this is pure coincidence, that's probably some of the more environmentally friendly grapes grown in the world, it's the Lubbock area. The wind that is a struggle for us often, when you hear us complain about, it's one of our best friends. We get a 2-inch rain, that's great, but often within 48 hours, we're back in 20% relative humidities. That makes a little bit tougher environment for these spores to survive in, and so we can minimalize a lot of our chemicals. Pests, they haven't found us out here. A lot of the pests that other regions of the world and even the U.S. deal with, we don't struggle with out here. So it's a product that you can feel good about. And one of the things that I think is one of the most interesting parts of the Texas wine industry that I think sets us apart from anywhere in the world is nearly any wine that you touch that's truly grown in Texas, very rarely do you touch an industry that whatever you're dealing with is family owned. These are families. The wineries are by and large family owned. The vineyards are nearly all family owned. So if there's and this is an industry that's attracted capital all over the world, and so becoming corporate was a natural fit for this industry. But the Texas wine industry is one of the most family owned as a whole industries you'll ever deal with.
That's
especially
fascinating.
Those here in the Lubbock region.
Is that just because of the age of the industry within the region, or has it not matured to the point of being consolidated, or is that part of the spirit of the people here?
I think it's all the above. So
Okay.
Texas is a very small business friendly state. Small business nearly always reflects a mom and pop as a whole. Often they'll grow and expand outside of that. But even your partnerships businesses that you see, and me and Tommy are great. I'm partners with Tommy English here in town. We're both hands-on, casting shadows in this, and we're both, Tommy's from a farming background, I'm from a farming background. It's family owned, and we're not special and unique in that, and that's really special about the industry. You can go through winery after winery after winery in the state of Texas and growers, and you'll all find that Texas is very, very friendly. It's very agrarian, so a lot of your industry is the professional farmer got involved in this industry. So those are nearly all family-owned farms. The political climate makes it a friendly place to be in business, and that general pioneering spirit. I mean, we're not an industry either truly yet, and this could change. This is how economies go. But the venture capitalists haven't come and sought us out yet. We've stayed literally from pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, and it's one reason. I mean, the industry failed back there before a few times. But that same spirit, we're beginning to get enough in here in a collective to where people are working together well, and it's benefiting the family farm, the family-owned businesses, the family-owned wineries, etc.
How cool. Okay. With that, do you mind if we start trying this first wine? And after that, let's start hearing about how you got involved at Caprock.
Absolutely. So, you want me just to launch into a diatribe about this wine?
Oh, please do. Give us a tasting 101. How should I taste it? What should I look for?
Well, don't expect, if you come out and taste wine with us, don't expect a whole lot of hoity-toity and a lot of crazy words. From a production standpoint, the word that I want reflected in my wines more than any other wine term is drinkability.
Okay.
I want you to enjoy our wines. That said, this first one is a wine very few people in the United States have ever tasted, and it's something we took on as a challenge. We're one of the few wineries in the nation that produce it. It's a wine called Pickardin. The French say Picardin, and we're from West Texas. We say it's Pickardin. We took it on as an experiment. We've done that before with grapes that didn't adapt to our region, and this is an experiment gone right.
All right.
This is a wine that's completely dry. It has got a lot of different notes grown here in the Lubbock region than it would have in France.
Okay.
So it's a Southern Rhone varietal. It's one of the. This won't mean anything to a lot of you. This will mean something to it. It's one of the 13 certified varietals for Chateauneuf-du-Pape. That's not why I planted it.
Mm-hmm.
I planted it because it looked like it had adaptability from when I studied it.
Okay.
And it's a wine that we're just absolutely thrilled that we were one of the pioneers on this one here in the Lubbock area,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really rewarded us. It's a fantastic, very drinkable wine.
And you were saying it in West Texas, it's developing its own characteristics compared
It
to.
is.
So
Yeah.
how is it different?
Well, I don't have a lot of experience with French Picardons because usually they blend them out. It's
Okay.
used as a blender. So there's a little bit of influence in Texas from some French winemakers, and we had one particular one came in the winery one day, and he argued with us. This can't be Picardon. I've had it before, and of course at the end of the conversation, he's wanting to know if he could buy some in the future. It's got more fruitiness here. Some of that has to do with the elevation.
Mm-hmm.
I assume, and this is I think a pretty safe assumption, that when land has been farmed or wine's been grown on the same land for thousands of years, you're going to lose some of the characteristics that we have in our soul here, because we're new.
Yeah.
Listen, this is a new farming region. This is a new population region. I mean, you think about it. I mean, we're just a little over 100 years old out here as far as how long Lubbock and the plows have been getting put in the soil. It's brand new land. And I think that's definitely got to have an influence. But I also believe the elevation, and I believe here where we're at this elevation, we get a tremendous amount of solar radiation, and it influences the grapes. And I think that has a lot to do with the real beautiful fruity characteristics. It's a wine with extremely soft tannins. It's just a really drinkable wine.
Love it.
Yep.
And so, if you'll humor me, people always swirl their glass. What does that mean? Why do we do it?
I do it because of nervous habit more than anything. I'll
All
be
right.
honest with you. But it opens the wines up slightly. But after a little bit of time, you'll begin to lose some characteristics. So don't swirl your glass too much.
Okay.
Swirl it enough to open it to the oxygen slightly.
Mm-hmm.
And Psalms will tell you start with the right nostril, go to the left. You'll definitely see some difference if you do that, but it's not required. More than anything, you're looking for maybe a flaw, maybe something in the wine that you need to prepare yourself for. This wine truly doesn't have any. A lot of it's because of the fantastic harvest we had in 19. Is a really nice crop, but it's also because of characteristics of the grape.
Okay.
So it's a large berry, so it's got very very little influence from the rest of from the skins, from the seeds, etc. So I personally, I'll take it right nostril, left nostril. I'll take it both. I'll smell one time mouth closed, one time mouth open, and then I taste and drink.
All right. So, what can we expect out of this one?
Well, you're going to have a lot of what we call the white fruits. I almost get a little bit of pineapple off this one, just slightly, and really smooth, crisp acidity, but not overpowering on the acidity. A friend of mine over at Noel over at 19th and Quaker calls it a porch pounder, and that's about as good a description as I've had. It's just, it doesn't need paired with food to complement the wine. It's a wine that really stands on its own. It's really drinkable, really easy to drink.
Well, I'm thoroughly enjoying it already. Totally understand the crispness. I'm seeing some of the pineapple. Is it something you serve chilled? Is it as is? How do you do it?
Yeah, normally we'd probably serve it colder than what we're drinking it today. A lot of my whites, I like them as cold as what you'd even serve a beer.
Okay.
So I'll put them, my whites I'll leave in the refrigerator. My reds I'll put in the refrigerator about 30 minutes before. Try to serve them around 65 degrees. But I like my whites, and it's totally personal. And I tell people this all the time on their palate. Don't feel like there's a rule. We can give you guidelines, and the guidelines are usually color-based. They really are red meat, red wines. There's a scientific reason behind it, and it's kind of coincidence. But drink a wine how you like it. That's how we want you to enjoy it.
Personal preference will always trump.
Absolutely. But I really like this wine cold. I really think it really accents the wine. And it holds it just a little bit on the front of the palate as it warms, if it's cold for me, and I get a little bit more influence on the back of the palate for what that's worth. And like I say, I'm by no means a master somm, but there are ways that we all like to drink our wines, and industry guidelines usually work pretty well.
Cool. Well, thanks for some of those tips. Those are super helpful.
It was a lot and it's quick. And most of it you can throw away.
Well, that's why I said 101. That's all I need. So, looking at my notes, let's talk about how you got involved at Caprock, because it's been around and you've been there now how long?
So me and Tommy pretty much shook hands towards the end of 17, and I came in boots on the ground early 18. We made the announcement in April of 18. So our first vintage were some of the grapes that I'd harvested in 17.
How long have you been growing?
So I started growing grapes around 2008.
Okay.
Originally, I mentioned was interested. My kids were showing some interest farming. But one of the things that really appealed to me about wine grape growing was the lack of need for heavy irrigation. So I've seen on my own farms, how whales have fell off in the Ogallala. I mean, it's leveled off some, but the drop from the time I started farming in 1990 to even 2000 was dramatic.
Okay.
Drought years, etc. And when I saw there was a crop that really didn't require much irrigation, it really appealed to me. Longevity. I mean, that meant a lot to us. If we get, if you have a farm, let's say you're watering 180 acres, and you can cut that back to irrigating 20 acres and have the same income, that would be huge for the Ogallala. Will that happen? I don't know, but it's definitely something that if we can, our challenge is to grow the consumer demand, and all this that we've talked about to this point, Texans affecting, that being our market, etc. If we can grow that demand, it will have the most direct influence on a crop grown here in the state and the growth of that crop that we've ever seen in the history of the state. And we're completely dependent upon consumer demand, which results in consumer education, which is why we're here today. And consumer education on this product is this isn't something we can depend on with clickbait. This is something we have to allow a customer to experience, because this is truly sensory. And so those challenges are huge. I didn't get in originally to be a wine producer. I really loved growing grapes, and that's why we did it, and love farming. And the first time I shared a wine, it was a Becker Vineyards Merlot with my Merlot in it. And the first time I was able to share that with friends, and we knew we had grown it, I was hooked.
Oh my goodness.
And it just kind of grew from there.
With local bouquet, really what we're trying to harp on is boiling it all back down to experiences and relationship, and creating shared experiences to help build relationships to make communities better. And the fact that you got to have an experience using your own product, something from your own land, your own hard work, and that really just casted a vision for you for what the next steps were. That's huge.
It was.
I can't imagine.
It's there's an intimacy. We produce fantastic quality cotton here. It's a perfect example, but it falls into a pool. In essence, it ends up in a mill somewhere overseas, and it's near impossible to share a T-shirt that grew on your farm. It's near impossible. This is a crop that you can sweat, you can make money, you can lose money, you can go through all the things, staying up all night fighting frost, all the things that go into the challenges of producing a crop, and then you can genuinely sit over a meal with someone you love, friends, share those experiences, watch the joy on their face. There's nothing like it. There's absolutely nothing like it.
I'm glad you brought up that cotton element, because something I've been curious about is, as we're the biggest cotton patch in the U.S., the fact that we can't get often U.S.-made cotton products just because we don't have the gins, or we have the gins, but the looms, or the places that actually create the fibers, or the thread material. And so we used to have that denim plant that closed back a couple years ago. And so it's really hard to have the whole industry in our region right now because of the way things change and how China and other countries continue to develop in those more on the labor side production. But with this industry, you're from grape to glass.
It's true.
So tell us a little bit about So you have to start bringing a new varietal. You told me you had to test it for, what was it, 3 years?
Yeah, so Pickardin's a great example. So when it came in, they sit from 3 to 5 years in quarantine. Once you bring a particular varietal over, then
And why do they do that?
well, I think a lot of it's disease.
Okay.
Just to not introduce new diseases, etc. And then from that point, you have to establish what's a characteristic of this particular plant. And like a lot of our vineyards are on grafted rootstock. So essentially, it takes about 2 years to build each individual plant. So you've got a nursery. They're located mostly in California, Washington, along that west coast. And you've got the time it takes to figure out what rootstock and how do I want this rootstock to affect this plant. So you can affect canopy management. You can affect bud break, disease management, nematode resistance. A lot of the thing, and that going to that trouble helps you to use fewer chemicals because you can do things, and it actually makes you, like the bud break part of it, you can't ever really get anything to completely miss the late frost we have here, but we can affect it to a degree. So you have that time in the nursery after you decide what you're going to do, that they're building you, okay, I want Picardin on 10114. Doesn't mean anything to anybody, but that's one of the conversations we might have. That's a particular rootstock. So they graft that. We get it. Sometimes you're fortunate and they've started that and you can get them within a year. But then you're 3 years once you've planted establishing it. And then from that point, if you were just going from dirt to I was going to go to glass, you're looking at 5 to 7 years.
Really?
Releasing your first vintage.
Okay.
So, I had the acres, and so that worked out pretty well. And then early on, me and a couple other growers, we started a small venture, and we started a small winery. And we just essentially, we were me and my family just felt like we wanted to be more into the production. We were farming out a lot of the wine production with that particular winery. And we heard that Tommy was looking for a change, either sell the winery, etc. So we kind of went into negotiation with him. Originally, I had a few investors lined up to go in with me. We couldn't come to a price agreement, but we definitely could see that we could work together early on. And I kind of kid about this. I hadn't showed him my business model at all on it, and all the time we were negotiating. And we were just hanging out one day, and he got a little wine in me. Okay, that's what he did. He got a little wine in me and lowered my guard. And I opened up the book, showed him what I could see doing it. And he said, we can work together. He said, let's just partner. And so I came in as a partner with him rather than me and an outside group buying him out.
Okay.
And I think it's the greatest move I could ever make.
How cool.
He's excellent moral character. He's been an excellent partner. He stood by us in decisions that I know he probably thinks is crazy because he's not necessarily a wine guy. He enjoys what we do and he enjoys the changes we made. But some of the things we come in, there's wineries that different places that don't spend the kind of money or do the things like we do. We don't use any carbon-based chemicals in the winemaking process.
Okay.
We really depend upon doing a great job in the vineyard, and some of the processes that we do take more time and cost more money. We give the winemaker out there freedom to choose the yeast. We don't go for the cheapest. Everything isn't about cutting a corner, and there's times you stack it up in the red building this thing. You're just thinking, is there ever going to be a break? But if you're going to build something in an industry that's already got challenges ahead of us, we feel like the last thing we want to build is something that's a subpar product.
If you give the customer something to complain about, you're going to put yourself 10 steps back. So
that's right. And as we go on, I do want to address some of the things that happened in the wine industry here in Texas as we built it. But one of the things we didn't want to happen was to put blood, sweat, and tears and tons of money into something. We've literally bet the farm on this, and then have a product that we absolutely regret having done it a certain way because we tried to cut a corner, etc. So fantastic. The Englishes are just fantastic people to deal with. They really are 100% on board and have just made fantastic partners and are extremely involved in what we do day to day. And so that turned out great. And then, so I went from grower, and I still farm, into a small segment of the wine industry. We owned a tasting room, and we're producing it with our grapes, but we were having to farm most of the winemaking out to literally every single thing we pour that has our name on it. We grew it, we crushed it. We don't farm out the harvest. We don't farm out anything all the way through to bottle.
That's fascinating.
It gives you a lot of areas you can make a mistake, but it also gives us a lot of areas we can control quality. We can look our customers in the eye, and we know that what we've done in the vineyard is safe for them and their family, and what we try to do in the winery is not only safe, but has a positive effect down the stream that Lubbockites can be proud to be associated with it, and our families can as well.
This week, my wife and I were drinking your cab, and I noticed on the bottle it's got y'all's farm on there. And so y'all are putting your name on it twice, and so showing these are our grapes and this is our wine.
Well, and that's, to me, that is important. If we were to buy something from another grower, for instance, say a grower had a varietal I don't grow that I loved, and we, Cab Franc, for instance, our Cab Franc, we would have to get that Cab Franc from another grower, and it wouldn't have my name on it. So truth in labeling is a big deal to us as well. It's actually, truth in labeling's a little mini war going on in the Texas industry right now for another podcast. But for us, it's really important for us that there is truth in labeling, and we still grow more grapes than we consume out at the winery. So I'm still in other Texas wines. Our family grapes are.
And so other labels could brag about the fact that they're using your product in there.
Yeah, and we're on some of those, and there's good cooperation with other wineries related to that. We've had some really fantastic people have influenced us through this process as I was coming up as a young grower, and I'm really happy to still sell some of those people our grapes. We really are.
How wonderful. That's fun for me to see, the spirit of collaboration within an industry. I come from the world of coffee, and so some of this language translates for us, and blended coffees versus single origin, the elevations, the humidities, those all affect the bean that we use and we roast, and then how we roast it affects how it actually comes out, either in the cup or in the espresso. And so the translations for me are really pretty similar, and it's really cool. And then past that, just the type of industry within coffee, we're often really collaborative. I know the managers and owners at the other shops, we like to do events together. We like to go drink each other's coffee. And so for me, it's always encouraging to see when other industries can do the same, because I appreciate it so much in mine. And so being able to see that level of cooperation, it changes the game. It makes it easier to actually compete, because that means you're all doing better because you're deciding how we work together. And so for me, that's exciting, and I hope that's a similar experience for you all.
I love a good cup of coffee as much or more than I love a good glass of wine. If I had to eliminate one out of my life, it would probably be the wine.
Oh, my goodness.
I love the coffee.
And so if it's all right, could we try the second glass?
Absolutely. So we get into a little bit of bragging rights with this second one. So this is a Roussanne, kind of a theme with a lot of our varietals, French varietal, Southern Rhone. One of the differences that the Texas consumer will see as they taste Texas wines and New World wines as a rule. If you don't recognize a varietal, there's a very good reason for that. It's a very simple reason, and it's the U.S. wine industry was basically built on what California grows by and large, and that's Cabernet and Chardonnay. Now, they grow lots of other things, but nearly every consumer recognizes those two varietals. Now, they're not as predominant in every region of Europe as they are in the U.S., those two varietals. We know Merlot, that's a French varietal. We know Malbec, et cetera, et cetera. But Roussanne is one that the average U.S. consumer in Texas has really done about as much with Roussanne as nearly any wine-grown region in the U.S. And there's a reason. It grows fantastic here, makes an extremely beautiful wine, and we're doing pretty well with it in some of the national competitions. I'll pour for you real quick. You want some? After you hear me brag about it, you might.
And I think you had a natural segue in there. Texas wine and Lubbock wines are competing.
Oh, they are. So I bring the Roussan because Roussan's a big deal to us. When me and Tommy first introduced a partnership, two of the first wines we introduced were my 17 Roussan and a wine we call Flirt, which is a semi-sweet, one of the few sweet wines that I've personally been associated with. And we entered three total wines in the San Francisco Chronicle, which is one of the biggest wine competitions in the nation. And we won double gold best of class with 2 out of 3 we entered, and one of them was the Roussan. That was the 17th.
My goodness.
So that was incredible. Often you wait decades in an industry to win those kind of awards. So we turned around the next year and we entered our 18 vintage. And we won double gold best of class again.
Back to back.
Now, I don't even want to talk about could we do a three-peat, but that was a 17 and 18, and I brought the 19 today, and I think it's as good or better than the 17 or 18.
Oh, my goodness.
The challenge is the 19. I mean, there's so many good wine producers here on the Texas High Plains that we're not the only ones producing some fantastic Roussan.
Okay.
So we got some challenges for 19, and I fear the Texas competitors more than any of the California specifically on Roussan, because there's some really, really good producers here.
So what are they judging at these competitions? Are they judging you against other Texas wines?
No.
Other price points? What's involved?
So the classes do break in price points, but it's a completely blind tasting.
Okay.
And we joke about the fact that, anytime a Texas wine wins best of class and the cover comes off, that they want to redo it because it happens. And there's been years recently. You got to keep in mind California's close to 1 million acres of planted wine grapes.
Compared to
Texas is probably 5,000 to 6,000
Okay.
at this point. And yet, acre for acre, when you do the factors, Texas will win more gold in these California competitions than California will.
Okay.
When you factor down acres. And it's 2 or 3 reasons. There's one specific reason I think that the Texas and the Lubbock industry have taken off faster than many other regions. And it's the fact that the professional farmers have embraced this industry, have embraced this crop. So you've got men and women who know their land, they know their water, they know chemical management. They're extremely sustainable in the sense that they're looking to the next generation. So they take fantastic care of their land. They know equipment, they know the weather here. And so these individuals embrace this industry, and it has fast-tracked us, in my opinion, more than a region that just said, hey, we're a great region, let's try some grapes. Oftentimes, in Texas, it was no different. Lubbock was no different. There might be hobbyists, retirees say, hey, let's start a vineyard. What really changed here was the professional farmer embracing it, and it jumped us way ahead because so many of the challenges in producing a crop, they already had the knowledge to deal with. So it's been big for Lubbock. It's been big for Texas as far as producing quality products. You've got really good quality growers here.
So there was a learning curve with the product, the grape itself, but
Right.
outside of that, there was decades of experience already built in.
Yeah, and just to give you an example how the mindset works here on the Texas High Plains. It's a challenging place to farm, and it's one of the reasons you see this region being one of the fastest in the world to adapt drip irrigation. So producers here are used to challenges. It can be tough here, and Mother Nature throws crazy stuff at you, but you'll see not only us adapt things like drip irrigation. John Deere will test products out here with some of these farmers because they know these are some of the more technologically advanced growers in the world. They're
Really?
always looking, and a lot of people think, oh, it's just the younger class. No, the generation before me was looking for new ways all the time, and producing wine grapes fit right into that. It was a really good fit, and we picked the right group of people to try to advance this industry right here in the Texas High Plains.
When people think about innovation, they think about Silicon Valley, they think about tech hubs and things like that. But really, there's innovation even on the High Plains in the middle of a cotton field because they're learning how can we optimize, how can we grow, how can we improve. And it's all those gradual changes that they need to do to actually maximize.
Well, we've got some other really cool stuff going on here. I mean, it's a great education center. the first viticulture and enology, which is the science of winemaking program east of UC Davis, was Texas Tech. It's not unusual. I mean, Texans adapt. Texans look for changes, and we can talk about some of the politics that advance this. But we had the Department of Agriculture, et cetera, the way they got behind the Texas wine industry. I don't think you see that kind of cooperation and support everywhere in the world, and definitely not everywhere in the U.S.
So we've got some advantages here.
We
so
do.
We're hoping we maximize on those.
We really do.
Going back to this wine real quick.
Okay.
What are some of the bragging points? What do you like? I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Well, you're talking to the person that literally gets to smell and taste from the time fermentation starts all the way through. And one of the notes on this wine that I really picked up early on was the tropical fruits, which is pineapple and banana. I was getting this so strong during fermentation and during that when the wine was sitting on the lees that it's still predominant to me on my palate, just the very light, subtle sense of banana. But it's extremely soft tannins, very characteristic of most of your 19 produced wines. 2019 was just a fantastic crop on yield and quality. So we had really soft tannins. We had great weather that year for producing wines. I personally would probably pair this wine with something like what I would call a medium fish, not something overpowering, but not something bland either. And or it's one again that you can just drink by itself. But the subtle notes on the back of the palate with the banana I still catch them. But I've got that planted in my head all the way back from fermentation. So,
and with that, so you're the grower. You're also an owner in the winery. What is the role of the winemaker in all of this? So what do you do versus what does he or she do?
I stay out of his way.
Oh, yeah?
So, look, I would consider myself, if I was given a title, a wine producer, because I'm, one way or another, we're producing the wines. My official title out there is GM. But, the winemakers are their knowledge of chemistry, period, is it's paramount.
Okay.
And we got a winemaker, his name's David Mueller. He interned under Kim McPherson. He's a graduate of Texas Tech's program. It's just best for, I can provide general direction. This is the direction we want to go. This is what's key and this is what's important. But the decisions that are made day to day, as far as what's coming out of the lab and what we need to adjust, what yeast for this particular wine do we need to use, what chemistry do you want this wine in from the vineyard when it comes in. We let Dave make those calls. And we've got a fantastic staff working with him as well. There's a guy named Roman Marcus. He's our production manager, beginning to make really good wine related decisions. Roman's really come a long ways.
Love it.
Even from the time he came in, great work ethic, great passion for the industry. But we've put together some guys that I kid around, but I don't kid around. Stay out of their way. And I'd probably be better off mopping the floors, just telling them what to do. And so that's what we do. We're willing to help them out any direction they can, but good winery needs a good winemaker.
Okay.
And needs an owner that stays out of his way.
So with that, are they more of a scientist? Are they more of an artist? Are they more of a chef? How does it work?
I think they're half scientist, half artiste. That's what I think.
Okay.
And I think you need a little bit of both. They need a good palate. They need good sensory perception.
So it can't just be the numbers. They have to be able to.
That's exactly right. There's a lot of this winemaking that goes back, thousands of years, and a lot of things haven't changed. But yeah, they absolutely do. But they also have to be ready. A good winemaker's ready for a challenge that comes up that he can't control, whether it was weather in the vineyard and something come in, you get a rain 2 days before you were gonna harvest. Well, you're susceptible, possibly, to rot at that point. It's a horrible word for us. Do we make a call and we get it in there and ferment it? Winemaker's going to call it, or do you want us to, spray something, be it organic or otherwise, to try to delay that and look at it again next week? these are challenges that you fall on your winemaker with. There can be equipment breakdown in the. I mean, it's all a lot of human manufactured equipment there, and you can have a breakdown. You need a winemaker that can adjust quickly and keep calm and make decisions. Keep the wine in good shape. That's as much artiste and just common sense as much as anything, but the science is still the science, and you can't argue with science. It'll win every time. So
can you give an example of that, of when you've had to overcome a challenge or an obstacle from the field or in the harvesting process and you've actually been able to turn it around?
Yeah, again and again, we something Dave, I'm going to speak on his behalf. So if we get a lot of rain, for instance, at harvest, we may be seeing maturity in certain elements of the phenolics of the grape. Could be the skins are getting, but let's just say the seeds are green, or let's say it's extremely hot and bricks rise. You have immature seeds, but all the other chemistry show there needs to be a positive. This wine's getting too far along, but yet you have green seeds, which could produce a negative sharp tannin in the wine. Winemaker makes the decision: do I leave it hanging, or do I adjust the yeast and certain other things we can do within the winery and get that crop out of the field, and let's get it in here. If he looks at it and there's a pretty low pH, which they love 3.6 to 3.8 pH, but the seeds are still green, I'm not going to push it on him. I do want my crop out of the field. I don't want it getting hailed on, but I'll let the winemaker make that call.
Because you have a lot of risk in that.
I do.
On the agriculture side, you don't have crop insurance or anything like that. So
well, we do, but it covers a fraction of your investment.
Got it.
It's a survival tool, and at some point in this industry, we all hope to make some profit. But those type of decisions, I don't want to just get my crop out of the field to get paid for the grapes and then have wine that I can't come in here and share with you. So it's key to listen to your winemaker and to know when is the time to bring it in. And that's just a small example of some of the challenges they have. You science wise. So let's say you've got a wine that is reductive currently. You're starving it for oxygen. You're beginning to get a little bit of a sulfite separation, etc. That's where a winemaker makes a decision. What do we do with this wine? Do we rack it off? Do we go to barrels? We've got to make a decision. But probably the most key decisions we make are nearly always at harvest. We harvest August, September. That's when we get some of our heaviest rains here on the High Plains. So we get some real challenges, and sometimes it makes me nuts when he makes me hang it a little bit longer. If we have to, we have to.
And so that means you're in the middle of harvest season right now. How's this year looking?
Oh, is a pretty weak crop. Fortunately, we had a fantastic crop in 19. We had an excess, and it was super, super premium quality.
Okay.
So it's kind of strange. I'll tell you, COVID's presented us all with some incredible challenges. We've been closed, over a third of our year. And in the last 6 months, the majority of that time, we've been closed, with the exception of. So I think if we'd have had another huge crop like we had in 19, we would be really struggling. And the Texas wine industry as a whole, this COVID has been terrible to it. You've got small wineries that are truly struggling. They're not able to. They wouldn't have been able to purchase a big crop from a lot of these growers out here in the Lubbock area if it had been a big crop.
Okay.
Because they're not selling wine, a lot of them in the hill country. They're just now getting back open. So we've had a huge challenge. It was a very short crop, very high quality. It was weather-related issues from back last fall, and challenges we've never seen. Well, we're optimistic we'll recover in 2021, but the 2020 crop, excellent quality, very, very low yields. So you couple that with COVID and all the other challenges, it's turned out 2020 was it's been a huge challenge for the Texas wine industry.
But with that, things are starting to open up a little more. You have a little bit more freedom. What are y'all doing at the winery these days?
Well, we've really tried to support local businesses, so we've been bringing in we've been bringing in on Saturdays kind of a food and wine market is what we call it. And we really open up to local mom and pop vendors to come out to the winery and share customers with us. So it's been really good for us. One of the challenges that we've all had is most wineries are over 51% based on alcohol. And so we've had to adjust and bring more food into the mix.
Okay.
To get that percentage down, and we've succeeded doing that. So we're working with Heart and Soul here, local kitchen, and they're doing a fantastic job. The food is incredible.
Oh, I love Jessica and the food she preps.
She's been great for us, and so those are some of the adjustments that we've tried to make. I personally have never wanted to run a restaurant. I like to be outside. I like producing grapes and other crops. But she takes care of business, and she's done a good job, and it's helped us. Not necessarily, I can't say just to get over, but it's helped us limp through what we've been going through. And now, I'll tell you, the locals are coming to see us, and we're out there. We're completely dependent upon local business, local customers, and we can distribute across the state, but that's been a challenge with COVID. I mean,
the restaurants aren't buying,
the bars aren't open. I mean, the restaurants are at limited capacity. There's some of them still pouring and serving what we delivered back in March. And so having the food's been a draw. That's been a big help. And of course, it's good food with Jessica. And so I can tell you, I can go on and on and on about the challenges that COVID's brought to us. But fortunately, if I'm going to be somewhere and go through this, let's be in Lubbock.
All right. I have a few more questions for you as we wrap up. Let's taste this last wine, because we've got a red right now, don't we?
We do. Cabernet Sauvignon, which is a real challenge to grow here in the Lubbock area.
What makes it tricky?
Where do I begin? I think some of the things that I love about growing some of the French varietals. So the little bit of science knowledge that I have is somewhat dangerous, but let's just look at practicalities. So I've talked to people that have been into the southern Rhone region of France, and they tell me Lubbock really doesn't have wind. Down that valley, that wind howls.
Okay. So
the first two we tasted were Southern Rhone varietals, and I can tell you they get through pollination here every single year better than Cabernet does. The Cabernet, just in a nutshell, doesn't want to yield here in the Lubbock area. What it does yield is fantastic.
Okay.
It loves our sunshine. It loves our dry conditions, but it never sets a big crop. And then it's a small berry that brings forth the intensity of the fruit.
Okay.
So in red wines, you're extremely dependent upon the skins to influence flavor and color. Cabernet is a very small berry, and there's regions of the world that can stack on 10, 20 tons an acre of Cabernet. We can't do that here. Good yield's 3 tons acre. The flip side of it is a beautiful wine when it's produced here. And we've had some really nice awards. The wine tastes and smells more mature and older. It smells like we've aged it longer here than we actually have to. And it's a grape that we still all have to plant because it's what the consumer knows, which is one of the challenges of the Texas wine industry. What we grow isn't always so familiar to the Texas consumer. And
just because some of the varietals, they're not California wines, they're new European wine, or new to us wines, and so that's where the education comes in.
Often. So what we do is we'll have a Cabernet Sauvignon. We'll produce a good wine with it. And even though it's a loss leader for the producers, often the farmers, it can be a loss leader for us because we have to pay more for it. However, your customers are familiar with it, and it allows you a segue to introduce them to varietals they might not be familiar with.
They'll try this wine, but buy 3 of the other.
Yeah, that's right. So let's just use Tempranillo as an example. Tempranillo is a beautiful red, grows well here. As a grower, sometimes I wish I only grew Tempranillo. Some years it breaks bud late. It usually misses a spring frost. It matures quick, so we get it out before a lot of your bad weather. If we're going to have a lot of rain in September, but you can't plant the whole region in Tempranillo. So once we get the consumer educated in Texas, we can probably, change that mentality, and we can just plant more and more and more of what grows really well here.
Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, we still have to adapt and find that balance for the consumer palate in Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, some of the more traditional Bordeaux varietals. That's some of the ones we have to lead with. Texas is still, by and large, the consumer consuming 90+% California wines.
Really? Okay.
Restaurants, retailers, etc. If we can win them over 5% at a time to what we're doing, the advantage for Texas and the Lubbock area, there's no words I can put into it. If we could gain over the next 20 years 20% of that market share just within Texas, we couldn't come up with enough acres out here.
No way.
We would be extremely short of wines. So consumer education is really key. It's really key, bringing them, up to speed on what we do here, what we grow, how we grow it, but back again and again to what it is. Be open-minded to new varietals. They're drinking these varietals in Europe. They're drinking Cab and Chard as well, but they're drinking the varietals we produce. It's just in the United States, we really cut our teeth, the nation as a whole, on varietals that were grown predominantly in California, the most dominant varietals out there. So now we got that challenge. In addition to being a beer state, we have the challenge of bringing the consumers around to what we grow varietal-wise.
Well, this is the perfect segue. One, what can people do to support you, Newsom English, the winery y'all have? And then two, how can they come out, come to the Friday night events? And then also, what can they do to support the industry? Is it just drinking more wine? Is it requesting at the restaurant? How do we move forward?
Well, yeah, I do want to promote the English Newsom brand. There's no doubt, but I also want to. There's a lot of good wineries, a lot of good producers here in the region. Look for Texas High Plains on a bottle. That's a big deal. Because if you're looking for Texas High Plains, of course, all of ours will be. If you're seeing Texas High Plains, it'll be down below the varietal on the bottle. It was grown in the Lubbock area. One way or another, that's coming back to benefit the industry, even if that wine was produced in the hill country. So definitely do that. Support your local wineries. These are the families that These are the people that are going to turn around and spend money with your business or with the business that you work at, et cetera, et cetera. We're the people that are going to advertise. And it's a good product. It's grown environmentally sound. It's grown by families. So I say that for the entire industry. For us as a winery, we really try to cater to what we feel like the local Lubbock consumer and family would be looking for. And not being a bar, our events are generally a little bit earlier in the evening. They're nearly always going to be live music that me and you could be sitting here and talking and enjoying, in the background. Fantastic food and just some excellent wines. Come out during the week. You're liable to get a tour from me. You never know. And if we do that, if we see you out there, we love sharing, and we're more able to share what we can often on weekdays, even than on the weekend. Weekends are busy, and we're so happy to see everybody. But we love to see everybody during the week as well.
So if they're wanting that special experience, come see you on a Tuesday.
It's pretty intimate, Tuesday through Friday during the day. You're liable to see me, may see Tommy. You never know, you might stumble across a winemaker. And it's a great opportunity for us to share how we do things that we can't always do when it's really, really busy. Safety's an issue, et cetera, et cetera. But I love walking through the winery on a Wednesday afternoon, seeing a couple that's there together and saying, "Hey, you want to see what's going on?" And I know sometimes we'll walk through the door and I'll hear a pump running, and I know, well, the winemaker ain't gonna like this, but here we come. So it's key, because we are truly as local gets. We're Lubbock-based families. Texas High Plains, born and bred. Our kids are still here. We're mostly tech graduates. I'm Wayland personally, but we're dominated by tech graduates as a whole. And we truly love being here. There's nowhere else we'd want to be doing what we're doing.
Well, I want to personally thank you for dedicating your career to this, growing an industry in Lubbock, and then from there, dedicating yourself to your craft and your family, making sure that what you do here is planting seeds. It's that tree that you planted that you're waiting to be 30 years old that benefits everyone else. So I say cheers to you and y'all.
Well, thank you.
Go support your local winery. Thank you for tuning in to the Local BK podcast. You can check us here live on Facebook Live. We do this once a month, and you'll also be able to check us out on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So we'll see y'all next time.